Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. Picture this. You're 4 weeks into your dream job, absolutely crushing it. First one in, last one out. Riding high on confidence. Then your boss calls you in for a meeting. You're practically floating into his office, ready for the pat on the back you've definitely earned. You sit down, and he looks at you with this completely calm expression and says, "You have a problem. A serious one. And if you can't solve it, you won't last here." Time stops. Your heart's hammering. Your face goes pale and your brain's spinning like a broken compass. A problem? What problem? You thought you were nailing everything. This gut-wrenching moment is exactly where our story begins. And that sinking feeling in your stomach? That's your first clue to understanding one of the most mind-bending truths about human nature. The book we're exploring today is Leadership and Self-Deception. Here's what makes it fascinating. It's not just another business book gathering dust on shelves. This thing became an international sensation, with basically zero traditional marketing. It spread like wildfire through pure word of mouth, from one leader to another, one family to the next, until it was translated into over 20 languages, and started transforming lives and companies from New York all the way to Beijing. The authors, a collective of brilliant minds called the Arbinger Institute, spent decades wrestling with this monster of a question. Why do we keep shooting ourselves in the foot? Why do we create the exact problems we complain about? What they discovered is almost ridiculously simple, yet powerful enough to shake the foundation of how we understand our relationships, our leadership, and our results. What you're about to hear isn't just bullet points and takeaways. It's a journey. By the time we're done, you'll understand this hidden psychological trap that's probably behind almost every conflict in your life, whether it's butting heads with your parents or getting frustrated with your coworkers. Even better, you'll discover the surprisingly simple secret to breaking free. This goes way beyond leadership books. This is about seeing yourself and everyone around you with a clarity that might actually blow your mind. So let's step into that conference room with Tom Callum, a guy who's about to discover that his biggest enemy is the one staring back at him in the mirror. Tom Callum knew how to win. Smart, ambitious, with a work ethic that could put anyone to shame, he'd just landed a senior management role at Zagram Company, a place he'd been dreaming about for years. His first month? Absolutely stellar. He outworked everyone, outshone everyone, convinced he was on the express elevator to the top. So when the legendary executive vice president, Bud Jefferson, summoned him for an all-day meeting, Tom was ready to cement his status as the company's next superstar. But Bud didn't lead with compliments. He led with that verbal gut punch, "You have a problem." Tom felt like he'd been slapped. A problem? What on earth could it be? Bud kept going, his voice steady but unflinching. "Everyone at work sees it. Your spouse sees it. Heck, I'd bet even your neighbors see it. The real issue? You have no idea it exists. This is self-deception in its purest form. We're not just talking about having a problem. We're talking about being completely blind to the fact that we have it." As Bud explains, this blindness is the silent killer in any organization, and honestly in any life. Instead of launching into a lecture, Bud tells Tom a story from his own past. Back when he was a young lawyer, fresh into fatherhood, life was good. His wife Nancy and their newborn son David were everything to him. But then his prestigious law firm yanked him away to San Francisco for this massive project, just days after David was born. Leaving crushed him, but he went anyway, determined to do what needed to be done. The firm stuck him in an office on the 21st floor while everyone else, the real action, was happening on the 25th floor. So Bud buried himself in work, pulling 20-hour days, living on deli sandwiches from the lobby. In his mind, he was the most dedicated person on the entire deal. After all, he'd abandoned his newborn baby. He was grinding away in isolation. He was working brutal hours. From where he sat, he was basically a martyr. But was he actually focused on the project? Bud admits he wasn't. He almost never went up to the 25th floor where the crucial negotiations were happening. He missed critical updates and got chewed out for it. He didn't even realize the team was being fed around the clock, right upstairs. Sure, his body was there, but his mind and heart checked out. He wasn't protecting the client. He was nursing his own misery, his own sense of sacrifice. Here's the killer question Bud throws at Tom. If someone had accused me back then of not being committed, do you think I would have agreed? Not a chance. Bud would have fought back. He'd have pointed to his brutal schedule, his sacrifice, his isolation. He saw himself as the hero. The real problem wasn't that he lacked commitment. The real problem was that he couldn't see that he lacked commitment. This, Bud explains, is what it means to be, quote, in the box. When we're in the box, we're living in a warped reality. We become the center of the universe, and other people, they turn into objects. They're either tools to help us get what we want, obstacles blocking our path, or just irrelevant background noise. Their needs, their dreams, their struggles suddenly feel less real, less important than our own. To hammer this home, Bud tells another story, this one from medical history. He talks about Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, who worked in a Vienna hospital back in the 1800s, where the death rate for new mothers was terrifyingly high. 1 in 10 women died from something called childbed fever. Semmelweis became obsessed with solving it. He tried everything, changed birthing positions, adjusted diets, even revamped how laundry was done. Nothing worked. Then he caught a break. He noticed that doctors in his ward, including himself, would go straight from performing autopsies on dead bodies to delivering babies without washing their hands. Nobody understood germs back then. Semmelweis theorized that invisible particles were being transferred from corpses to living mothers. He made everyone wash their hands with a chlorine solution. The result? The death rate plummeted to 1 in 100. The horrifying truth was that the doctors, the very people trying to save lives, were the ones killing their patients, and they'd been completely blind to it. Self-deception, Bud explains, is exactly like that invisible disease. It's something we all carry to some degree, and it's the root cause of nearly every people problem we face. Conflicts, lack of motivation, terrible teamwork, constant stress. We're often spreading the very disease we're complaining about. This hits Tom like a freight train. He starts thinking about his old boss, Chuck Staley, a guy who was technically brilliant but universally resented. Chuck would do all the correct leadership things, ask about your family, practice active listening, but you could always sense that to him, you were just a chess piece. His focus was always on himself. He was drowning in the box. Bud contrasts this with Lou Herbert, Zagram's legendary former president. Lou was sometimes socially awkward. He didn't always say things the right way. Once, after Bud had completed almost all his assignments, Lou publicly called him out for the one he'd missed. Later, Lou put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're a talented man, but you won't ever let us down again, will you?" By any normal standard, Bud should have been offended, but he wasn't. He felt inspired. He could feel Lou's genuine care and belief in him. Lou wasn't attacking him. He was investing in him. Lou lived outside the box. The difference between Lou and Chuck wasn't about skills or techniques. It was something deeper, something fundamental. Lou saw people as people. Chuck saw people as objects. This is where the lesson gets really interesting. Bud illustrates it with this brilliantly simple story. Imagine you're on a flight with open seating. You snag a window seat with an empty seat next to it. As passengers stream down the aisle hunting for spots, what do? Bud confesses that he once plopped his briefcase on the empty seat and spread his newspaper wide, basically turning himself into a human, quote, "do not disturb" sign. In that moment, those other passengers weren't people to him. They were threats to his comfort. He was deep in the box. Now compare that to another flight. Bud and his wife got separated seats. As they stood in the aisle trying to figure it out, a woman from the back of the plane walked up and said, "Excuse me, if you need 2 seats together, I think the one next to me is open. I'd be happy to take one of yours." She was doing basically the same thing as Bud in the first story. sitting next to an empty seat, watching other passengers. But her internal world was completely different. She saw Bud and his wife, not as inconveniences, but as people with needs just as real as her own. She was living outside the box. Being in the box isn't about what we do. It's about what we feel underneath what we do. You can do something tough, like Lou correcting Bud, and be totally outside the box. And you can do something nice, like apologizing, while being completely trapped inside the box. Tom had to face this when remembering an incident with Joyce, someone in his department who'd accidentally erased his whiteboard. He'd called her into his office, refused to shake her hand, and coldly told her never to touch his board again. Sure, he got the result he wanted. She'd never touch it again, but he'd also crushed her spirit and turned himself into the kind of leader people fear, not follow. He'd treated her like an annoying object. He was locked in the box. So here's the million-dollar question. If being in the box is so destructive, how do we end up there in the first place? The answer is something called self-betrayal. Bud shares another deeply personal story. One night years ago, his infant son David started crying. In that instant, Bud had this feeling, this sense of what he should do. Get up and take care of David so Nancy can sleep. It was a simple, human impulse to help someone he loved. But he didn't do it. He stayed in bed. In that tiny moment of choosing to ignore his own sense of what was right, he betrayed himself. And here's where things get really wild. The second Bud betrayed himself, his entire view of the world shifted to justify staying in bed. How did he suddenly see Nancy, lying right next to him? She transformed in his mind into this lazy, inconsiderate person who didn't appreciate all his hard work. Maybe she was even faking being asleep. And how did he start seeing himself? He became the victim, the exhausted, hard-working man who desperately needed his sleep. The sensitive one who actually heard the baby when she didn't. He was the good husband, the good dad stuck with a lousy wife. His view of himself inflated like a balloon, while his view of her got twisted and dark. He started blaming her. All of this happened in seconds, and it all served one purpose: to make him feel justified for not getting up. This is how we enter the box. First, we get this sense of something we should do for another person. Then we choose to betray that sense. We go against it. Instantly, our worldview warps to justify our self-betrayal. We blow up others' faults, inflate our own goodness, exaggerate the importance of anything that makes our choice look reasonable, and we start pointing fingers. By doing all this, we lock ourselves in the box. Over time, we betray ourselves so often that we start carrying these boxes everywhere. We build these self-justifying identities. Maybe we see ourselves as the responsible one, the smart one, or the good spouse. These identities make us defensive. If someone challenges our self-image as a good spouse, we don't listen. We immediately blame them for being ungrateful or impossible. We walk into brand new situations already in the box, primed to see others as objects that either threaten or support our fragile, self-justifying stories. This creates the most destructive pattern of all: collusion. Kate Stenerud, Zagrum's president, shares a story about her rebellious teenage son, Brian. When she's in the box, she sees him as irresponsible and a troublemaker. So what does she do? She criticizes him, disciplines him harshly, hovers over every move he makes. Now, how does Brian, from inside his own box, see her? He sees her as a controlling dictator who doesn't love him. And how does a teenage boy react to a dictator? He rebels. He stays out later. He does even more of the stuff she's complaining about. They're locked in this toxic dance. Her in-the-box behavior provokes his in-the-box behavior, which gives her more ammunition to stay in her box and keep criticizing him. It's a perfect self-feeding loop of misery. They're collaborating and giving each other reasons to stay trapped. Kate shares this painful memory. One night, she gave Brian this ridiculously early curfew, secretly hoping he'd refuse so she could deny him the car. To her shock, he agreed. All evening she sat there stewing, building her mental case against him. Then, at 10:29 p.m., 1 minute before curfew, she heard tires squealing into the driveway. He'd made it. And what did she feel in that moment? Relief? Joy? Pride? Nope, she felt disappointed. This is the dark secret of the box. When we're trapped inside it, what we crave more than anything is justification. We need the other person to be the problem because that makes us feel right. Her son being responsible robbed her of her justification. So even when he did exactly what she'd asked, she couldn't let him win. She met him at the door with a cold, "You sure cut it close, didn't you?" This is why, when we're in the box, we unknowingly invite the exact behaviors in others that we claim to hate. We need problems to feed our addiction to feeling justified. At this point, Tom is having a full-on existential crisis. He's seeing his entire life in these stories. His strained marriage with his wife Laura, his difficult relationship with his son Todd. He's beginning to realize he has a massive problem. So here's the ultimate question: how do you escape the box? This is where the book drops its most powerful and counterintuitive wisdom. Lou Herbert, the legendary founder, comes back to explain. He tells Tom all the things that don't work. You can't escape by trying to change other people. That's already an in-the-box strategy. You can't escape by coping with them. Coping is just passive blame in disguise. You can't escape by leaving. The problem lives inside you, so you just pack your box and take it with you. You can't escape by communicating better. If you're in the box, your communication will be soaked in blame, no matter how polished your technique. You can't escape by learning new skills. Those just become fancier tools for staying in the box. And here's the real kicker. You can't even escape by changing your own behavior. Why not? Because any behavior you decide to change while you're in the box is just a new strategy for staying in the box. It's still all about you. Apologizing when you don't mean it. Being nice while feeling contempt inside. These are just sophisticated manipulations. Tom is completely stumped. If none of that works, what does? Lou smiles. You already know, he says. He asked Tom to think about the night before. After his first intense day of meetings, Tom went home. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel that familiar resentment toward his wife and son. He barbecued for them. He asked his son Todd to teach him about tuning cars, something he'd always dismissed before. He actually connected with them. He was outside the box. How did it happen? Did he decide to change his behavior? Nope. Something changed inside him. The way out of the box isn't about doing different things. It's about being different. The box is a state of resistance. It's when we're actively resisting another person's humanity. The moment we stop resisting, the moment we genuinely see another person as a person, with needs and hopes and fears as real and important as our own, in that exact instant, we're out of the box. Think back to Bud's story about the crying baby. His feeling to help his wife was an out-of-the-box moment. He entered the box when he resisted that feeling. Getting out is simply stopping the resistance. So where does that leave us? The desire to get out of the box is the beginning of actually getting out. The moment you question your own righteousness, the moment you wonder if maybe, just maybe, you're part of the problem, that's when the walls of the box start to crumble. Your heart softens. You see the other person clearly again. And once you're out, how do you stay out? By honoring those small, simple impulses you get to help others. You don't have to save the world or do everything for everyone. But when you get that sense, to listen, to apologize, to help, to acknowledge, you act on it. You don't betray it. Each time you honor that sense, you get stronger at staying outside the box. The story wraps up with Lou sharing his own transformation. After learning these principles, he realized his in-the-box leadership had nearly destroyed his company. He'd driven away his best people, including Kate Stenerud. His first act after getting out of the box was incredibly humble. He bought a ladder, a symbol of something he'd wrongly taken from Kate's department. drove to her house, and apologized. He asked for her help to rebuild Zagram on this new foundation. Together, they created a culture where people were held accountable not just for their own results, but for their impact on other people's results. A culture where seeing people as people wasn't some soft skill, it was the #1 strategic priority. In the final scene, Bud gives Tom his last assignment. He tells him to think about his time with his difficult old boss, Chuck Staley, but not to analyze Chuck's box. Instead, to look for his own. To ask himself, was I really focused on results, or was I focused on proving Chuck wrong? Did I offer genuine help, or did I secretly enjoy when he failed because it justified my blame? Because living this material isn't about diagnosing everyone else. It's about discovering our own blindness. It's about stopping our resistance to other people's humanity, and in doing that, finally finding our own. What an incredible journey this book takes you on. When you first hear the premise of leadership and self-deception, it sounds almost too simple. See people as people, not objects. But as the story unfolds layer by layer, you realize this simple idea has depths that touch literally every single interaction in your life. The most powerful insight for me is this concept of self-betrayal. It's the idea that our biggest problems don't start with some grand evil act. They start in the tiniest moments. The moment we feel we should listen, but we interrupt instead. The moment we know we should apologize, but our pride holds us back. The moment we could offer help, but we decide it's not our problem. In that microscopic act of resistance, we betray our better selves and the box starts forming around us. Our reality bends to make our small betrayal feel justified, and from that single seed, entire forests of conflict, resentment, and failure can grow. This explains so much about being human. It explains why two people in the same argument can have completely different memories of what happened, because from inside their boxes, they're literally living in different, self-justifying realities. It explains why we sometimes feel this weird, bitter satisfaction when someone we dislike fails. Their failure feeds our box. It proves we were right about them all along. The book challenges us to embrace this radical kind of accountability. It suggests that even when someone is genuinely difficult, our blame, our in-the-box response, isn't caused by their behavior. It's caused by our own self-betrayal. And here's the worst part. Our blame will almost certainly trigger more of the exact behavior we're complaining about. We become the architects of our own misery. So what can we actually do, starting right now? The book offers this beautifully simple path. First, learn to spot the warning signs of being in the box. Do you feel blame, justification? Do you see others as problems? Are you focused on what they're doing wrong, instead of what you can do right to help? These feelings are your alarm bells. They're the smoke that tells you there's a fire of self-betrayal burning inside. Second, when you catch yourself in the box, don't try to fight your way out with behavioral changes. You can't think your way out. Instead, shift your focus outward. Try to see the humanity of the person in front of you. Ask yourself, what are their needs, their pressures, their fears? Try to imagine their world. In that moment of genuine curiosity and empathy, the resistance inside you will start to melt. The box will begin to dissolve. And third, once you're out, act on that clearer vision. Do the simple, decent thing you feel prompted to do. It doesn't have to be dramatic. A listening ear, a kind word, an apology, an offer of help. These small acts of honoring others are what keep us outside the box and connected to the world around us. That was our deep dive into leadership and self-deception by the Arbinger Institute. We've explored the core ideas today, but I need to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. It can show you the scenery, but it can't give you the feeling of the sun on your face or the wind in your hair. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you never expected. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I really encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts. It's an experience that can genuinely transform how you see yourself, your relationships, and your place in the world. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you something new to think about, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.